from the college. You go there, man, you just can't help it. You got to
That's very good.
Nothing very deep.
True.
I can show you how to put the link here, you bring it.
We have all the COVID vaccination that we need.
If you want to get on the dog, you want to come in, you have welding, you get all the things. Oh.
Now, you said that the other project, he's not the,
All right, folks, I have 6 o'clock.
Gonna be discussed later on.
Yes, sir. I'm on my iPad, 6 o'clock. Go ahead, so you want to set that up?
Yeah, they do
Get this on.
they give it their capacity for Elliston. It's like if that, they're going to, you want to see what happens with the legislative delegation, first net funding, and then go to talking about that.
Right, yeah.
All right, folks, I have 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Mr. Brown? Here. Mr. Dial? Mr. Hazelberger?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Osborne?
Here.
Mr. Pridgen?
Here.
Mr. Sampson?
Here.
Mr. Scott? Mr. Sweat?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mayor Whit?
Here.
And Chairman Green.
Here. All right. We have the minutes first thing on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Voice vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Next item is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Have a motion and a second. By voice vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We have no presentations. Next item that we have is persons wishing to address a committee. We'll go for in-person first, the folks who are here. Do we have anybody that wishes to address the committee? Mr. Ford?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and address we can start here. Okay. I'm here representing the Board of County Commission for Columbia County. I was told y'all wanted kind of some requests of what we would like to see on this committee. And, number one, we'd like to have one committee. And we two committees. I don't think we need them contradicting each other. The makeup of that meeting, I would like to see 2 commissioners, 2 city councilmen, county managers, city managers, and engineers. At that point. If that's possible, and, I think one of our goals should be, if we form this committee, we should have a 5-year goal, that in 5 years, we form a regional utility at that point. And I think that should be in writing with a contract between the county and the city. And, I see that to be the best way forward for all the citizens of Columbia County as far as getting infrastructure and utilities for the county. Independent board over that committee. We can discuss the makeup of that board as we go along and how we're going to, get information from different ones on how to set that regional utility up, what best suits the county, what suits the city, as far as that goes for individuals. And, the county really wants to work with the city on this. So we think we should be equal partners on this. And the only way to be equal partners and for the county to put funding in the utility is through a regional utility, is how we see it. And, like I say, I'm speaking for myself and for the board tonight. I'd like to see, what y'all come up with, and I'll plan to present this to my board Thursday night and get their reaction to it. But, some comments at past board meetings and stuff, I think that's the only way that the city and the county can proceed, is funding, us putting funding into utilities, and, you know, we're getting grants for the utilities. And, I think a regional utility is the answer to all of our problems, including, your problems also.
Mr. Ford, thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you for your comments. You know, one of the things, this is just a utility committee for us. So, you know, obviously, we're on the committee here. I think we want to make sure that we give our city council members an opportunity, every one of them, to take stock of the comments that you gave tonight and make a determination. So I don't think that's something we're going to do tonight.
Oh, I understand that completely. I fully expect y'all to take it before your whole, council and, talk about it. And, like I say, I'll take it before my board and we'll discuss it also. And, if y'all agree to that, we agree to it, you know, our board agrees to it, and, then we'll start laying out guidelines to proceed with the committee.
Let me ask you just one question, just so I can get clarified. Now, we already have a utility system that's owned by the city and financed by the city. Would y'all want to take over that debt?
Well, what we would do, the way I think it would work, the way talking to other places that's done these utilities, you would have an appraisal done on the city's utilities, and an appraisal done on the county's utilities. They'll include that debt in that appraisal, and the city will be paid back for whatever equity they have in their utility, and the county gets paid for their utilities over whatever we agree on, 15, 20, 25-year payout plan. And, you know, that's all the stuff that would have to be decided when forming the utility. But yeah, definitely the city would be reimbursed for what equity they have in the utility, as well as the county would be reimbursed for any equity they have in their utility.
But we also have bonds that we would have to figure out how to do that too.
Well, at that point, you know, the regional utility would take over any part of the water, sewer, gas. You know, you know, the bottom line is you take the politics out of the utility. And that's what a regional utility really does, take the politics out of it. And, it just sees what's best for growing the county and the city too. And I think it would open up the door for annexation possibilities for the city at that point also. And, you know, I think your long-term goal would be to have more of your revenue coming in off of, property taxes and stuff like that, as far as annexing into the city, annexing more into the city. I think Mr. Helpenberger has alluded to the fact that, you know, he would really like to see some more annexation go on, and that, you know, if you can get the utility, you're gonna get the infrastructure, or the business coming in, and that's where you get tax. You know, our first goal has got to be getting utilities available throughout the county in certain spots where we see economic opportunities. So, that's what I see as our way forward for utilities.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. When you mentioned that, the debt and the different ways that the revenue could work, I'm sure there would be a way to reimburse ongoing revenue for periods of time too, because the city relies quite heavily on, utility income. And that's one of the things we have to ensure that, you know, going down the road when we present different things, how that's protected. But I think we got to work together.
Yeah, you can structure the utility to pay out how you want it to be paid out. I mean, that's stuff you can put in, you know, to the utility as you lay out the plan for it. There's lots of different ways to set up, you know, utilities. There's a payout plans and stuff. And we can explore all avenues, you know. It's in nobody's interest to see the city go bankrupt. You know, and that's not what we're after. we both can strive, forward. And the only way to do that through economic opportunity is if we have infrastructure as far as gas and water and sewer. Like I say again, the county does want to work with the city, but it's got to be a good deal for both parties. It can't just be a good deal for one side.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Mr. Ford, thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us tonight, and we'll work with the city manager and the rest of the city council.
Mr. Kraus has a few things he would like to add too about water reuse.
Yes, sir, Mr. Kraus.
I was originally, thank you, by the way, I was originally not planning to speak tonight, but in talking with the water manager, water reuse, assumptive use permits, about the credits you have to do to put the water back into the aquifer in order to get the ability to withdraw. They keep referring to, you have to look at what's being done in Tampa. Because obviously Tampa has no water, and yet they're able to continue to grow and continue to expand. And they've looked at recharge and water aquifer recharge on a regional basis. So it's not just an individual community that tries to do it, so that all communities have the chance to get consumptive use permits and withdraw, because they're able to do their, the credits throughout a regional basis. And they actually, I think, in multiple counties. I don't have all the details of it, but every time we talk to the water management district, that particular model keeps coming up. And so I'd like to encourage the city to consider joining with the county to try and look into it and see what, if approaching the reuse on a regional basis would help both the city and the county with our consumptive use permits.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in person? Mr. Osborne on station.
If I could ask, the county question, Fort White, would we be looking at encompassing them into the regional utility?
It would be countywide.
Okay. I would, because I know that they've done some extensive work down there, and I think that that's something that would have to be looked at too, is getting them on board if we decided to do countywide.
Yeah, that'd be part of it.
I got a question, Mr. Green, let me get around here. Thank you. This is the first time I've heard this brought up since 2008, the idea of a regional utility and the county investing in the city's utility. But I've been going to the county meetings. This is the first time. I don't know if this is Mr. Commissioner Ford's idea in present time, but this hasn't even, as far as I can tell, been discussed at the county level yet.
It has not. That's just my,
So this is just Mr. Ford's idea. I just wanted to get that clarified.
Yes.
Now it's clarified. Thank you very much, Mr. Green.
Yes, sir.
that's why I'm taking to my board.
Can I have one more thing?
Yes, sir, Mr. Crowe.
I want to answer Mr. Osborne's question as well. In terms of the town of Fort White, they are going to, as they did last year, submit a request to the legislature to fund their water system. They received 100 acres from the water management district where they could put a new well field, because they have bad water. And we don't want them to have bad water. So they are going to be requesting this of the legislature funding to either replace their well field or connect to Ellisville. So they have a new water source so they can get clean water. So they are part of the county, and that is something we have to consider, because all of us don't want citizens of the county having bad water.
Absolutely.
They are going to the legislative meeting, I guess it's next Tuesday on the 19th. And they're going to be asking again. They were actually funded last year in the legislature, and because of COVID, it ended up getting vetoed. So we know it's a very important and critically time-sensitive issue.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anyone else in person that would like to speak? Yes, sir, Mr. Ford.
And when you're talking, you're addressing Fort White, they do have a water system in that town now. So they would have to also be refunded, they would have to have some kind of funding for their system they have now, or some kind of payout plan also for any
Yes.
infrastructure they have. And like I say now, I can't talk for the town of Fort White. They have a council and a mayor and all that too, but, spoken to them in the past, I think they would, love to be a part of whatever, any way we could help them out with water. Even maybe facility outside of town for a grocery store and stuff like that.
Yes, sir.
But there again, I just want to make it clear that I can't talk for the town council for a while.
Completely understand, thank you. Anyone else in person that would like to speak to this issue? Do we have anyone via telephone or online that would like to speak to this issue?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. Or any other issue, persons wishing to address the committee for any other reasons? All right, we'll conclude that section of the agenda. We'll move on. We have old business, we have none. And the first thing that we have under new business, Mr. Osborne, Utility Emergency Response Plan.
Mr. Chair, this is being brought forward because of the American Water Infrastructure Act of 2018. It requires all community water systems serving a population greater than 3,300 people to get a risk and resiliency done, and it has to be submitted by June 30th of 2021. Now, under our last fiscal year, we took an approach to get on this right away and made sure that we funded the risk and resiliency and had it completed. Now we are looking to do the second portion of this, which is the emergency response plan. The emergency response plan is based on everything that we discovered and uncovered during our risk and resiliency assessment. So I back this, that we are able to go ahead and approve and recommend the scope of service that Jones Edmonds supplied to finish this project so that we may meet the federal guidelines and deadlines. The risk and resiliency and the ERP are considered high security. We don't actually send these once they're completed to the EPA, but we have to send verification that we have completed them. And then in every 5 years, we have to update them. So, like I said, this is something that has come down through the EPA and it needs to be addressed, and we've tried to do it before we get close to any deadlines. There's a lot of places out there that waited for the last minute and they got stuck. And we've taken a proactive stance to make sure that this is completed well ahead of time.
Absolutely, I appreciate your work on this issue. Is there anyone that has any questions or comments? Mr. Osborne, please don't leave the stand just in case we have any questions. Do we have anybody that has questions concerning the emergency response plan? I have a quick question for you. Can you talk just a little bit about the difference between the emergency response plan and the water risk resilience assessment?
Okay, the risk and resiliency assessment, what we did is we went through our plan. We found anywhere where we could be impacted. We even looked at financing through City Hall. We looked at every aspect of the city that deals with utilities. From operating and our equipment and our resiliency there, whether we have backup equipment, in case we have an equipment failure. We went through everything. We did this last year. We had a panel we put together with different city employees. We had HR, we had finance, we had the fire department. Everybody came together and we came up and we graded everything throughout the city that dealt with utilities. And we came up with a risk and resiliency. It shows where we have great and where we have weaknesses. Now, the emergency response plan is to address any weaknesses. And we have to be prepared that if this situation happens, this is what we're going to do to rectify it.
Yes, sir.
Basically, in a nutshell, what we can have.
So, thank you. I appreciate you clearing that up for me. Is there a motion to recommend the approval to the city council for the purchase for the utility emergency response plan.
I make a motion on the utility emergency response plan to approve that.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to recommend to the city council, the utility emergency response plan, as presented. Any other discussion? Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Hazelberger?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Pridgen?
Yes.
Mr. Sampson?
Don't leave, Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. Swett?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Witt?
Yes.
Chairman Green?
Yes. Mr. Osborne, I'm trying to prevent you from having to come up and down. I'm just curious, and you may not know the answer to this, so that's fine if you don't. Just for me, to try to understand, the county or the city has a consumptive use permit, and we have our wells, and we're pulling water out not to exceed our consumptive use permit. If the county puts wells right beside us in the exact same aquifer, we're pulling the exact same water. My question to you is, how is it that they're able to get millions of gallons of consumptive use that the city's not able to get if we're both pulling from the same aquifer the exact same water?
I think that's a question that would have to be taken up with Swanee River Water Management District, honestly.
Okay,
From what I understand, the county has applied for a water use permit, or getting ready to. Anything pulled out of is going to have to be offset. Any impacts to the aquifer are going to have to be offset. So if there's impacts added on as we try to increase ours, we're going to have to offset them impacts.
so regardless of which organization, or even if a private organization wanted to have a consumptive use permit, and they were pulling from that same aquifer, everyone is under the same requirement for Swanee River water
To offset
to
the
offset.
impact to that area.
So I'm just, and again, you may not know the answer, I'm just curious, I'm just thinking if, how is it that they're able to have success in increasing that consumptive use permit for them, or even beginning one, because they don't have one that I know of at this time. Whereas for us, it's just an increase in hours.
Well, with ours, we have a permit issued right now. They're actually trying to apply for one for that area. So they follow different guidelines than we do trying to get ours increased.
Yes,
But again, it's Swanee River that you'd have to get the detailed information.
but as far as you know, water is coming from the same source.
Yes,
Okay.
same one.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Appreciate it. Yes,
I think Jamie has something to say.
yes, ma'am. Jim, if you don't mind stating your name when you come.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Jamie Bell. I'm an engineer with Jones Edmonds. In response to Mr. Chair, what you just asked Mr. Osborne, I might be able to offer a little bit of clarity into how the limitations on the consumptive use permit work. And so the city of Lake City has a water use permit. It's in Swanee, it's called water use, and the other water management districts it's called consumptive use, but they are the same thing, flow and cup. You have a permit allocation of 4.19 million gallons per day. And the question has come up, if you would wish to increase the allocation of your permit, why can you not do so without doing these extra measures that we're undertaking through finding offset? And that is because the impact we're talking about is to the lower Santa Fe and Ichitupney minimum flow and level that has been set and adopted by the Florida legislature. And that states basically the minimum flows and the minimum water levels that are required to maintain the ecology, to support ecosystem in those river systems. And an impact is determined at certain gauges along the river. And so you've been approved your permit up to a certain amount, but if you want to increase that permit allocation, you will then increase your impact. And the way the MFL has been written, you are responsible for offsetting your entire water use if that increase leads to an increased impact. The reason why Columbia County might be able to get a new water use permit, or a private entity might be able to get a new water use permit, is because the amount that they withdraw does not meet the minimum threshold for an impact. The district has certain numbers they look for when they run a model. Let's say you pulled 10,000 gallons of water here, it may not show an impact down at the river. But if you pull 10 million, it certainly will. And so they have a certain amount of impact they look for, and they did some preliminary modeling that showed between 400 and 500,000 gallons could be pulled in this area without approaching that threshold. But beyond that amount, there would be an impact, and therefore it would have to be offset. And so that being said, if a new user came in and tried to request an amount of water that is relatively small and beneath that threshold for a minimum impact with the river, it would likely be approved based only on that one thing. There are other considerations.
Sure.
However, if it went to a high enough amount that it did overtop that threshold for an impact, which I believe is 0.1 cubic feet per second, don't quote me on that, I have to double check. But if you surpass that, then you have to offset your impact. So basically, the district allows certain small amounts of withdrawals. When you get past a certain amount, you're required to offset your entire withdrawal the way the rule is written. Now, the district is currently reviewing the existing MFL on that river system, and they are changing the way those impacts are addressed. So again, right now, you have to offset the whole thing for just a little increase in your existing permit. However, they're looking to change to a more proportional impact assessment system where you don't have to offset your entire amount, but just the amount that's impacted the river system. So it's a little bit complicated. They're still working through it. They were hoping to get it approved by this year's legislative session, but it was not completed in time. And so the district is shooting for next legislative session to change that, which may then change the amount of water you could request on your water use permit. So.
Ms. Bell, just a question. So if we had multiple people apply for a water use permit, and I say people, but organizations,
Sure.
right? If we have multiple and they're all under that threshold, but collectively they exceed that threshold. Is that something that the water management district is looking at? So for example, we talked about whether it's Warehouse or the county, whoever else may come into our area and need large amounts of water. And so when we're looking at multiple users of the water who individually are all underneath the threshold, but collectively they exceed the threshold, is that something that they look at?
That is something that has been discussed at the water management district level, but at this time, I do not believe they have a mechanism in place to address cumulative impact by different users. And so instead, they sort of have one threshold that if multiple different private entities all stayed under it, then in theory, all of those could get their water use permit. But they do have a groundwater model, and I believe they are working towards assessing cumulative impact like that. And when that time comes, then it's sort of a first come, first served basis where if you get in before that rule changes, you're fine. I would need to confirm with the district, but that is, I know something that's been discussed in the past. However, right now, if a user came into North Florida Mega Industrial Park, which is right next to your well field, and applied for a permit that when modeled was under the threshold impact, they would likely be awarded that permit if it met the rest of the criteria in the rule.
And so I can't help but think that the city is at a disadvantage then because we already have a permit, whereas the county doesn't have one. If we had a regional utility, they don't have one, right? If there were a private industry out there for the warehouse or property, they don't have one. So the city is having a tough time then, or would have a tough time competing against these other organizations to try to get the water that's coming from the exact same aquifer.
You are not incorrect. However, I do. However, I would like to say though, it is possible that, so the city currently has a water use permit for your public supply that serves the city of Lake City, right?
Right.
Theoretically, I believe the city could go after a new water use permit for a new disconnected water use, say, to serve an industrial park. If it's a new well and it's a unconnected water supply system on discontiguous parcels, I believe the city could get a permit up to that impact threshold we've been talking about.
Oh, well, that's definitely different. So that's the first time I've heard that.
I've got a question about it. So discontiguous, so we couldn't draw it at Price Creek?
Correct.
Okay, but in addition, if another entity gets a water use permit, it could be assigned to the city to draw out of our current wells. Is that correct?
I do not believe so, because when you get a water use permit, they look at both the source, and by source, I don't entirely mean the upper Florida aquifer, which is technically your water source, but I mean where you're actually physically drawing the water from. So you have the city's well field at Price Creek. That is the location where you draw your water from. And so your permit is based on where you draw your water and who you're giving your water to. So you're drawing from those wells and you're using it for public supply purposes within the city of Lake City's transmission system. If the city were to, on a different parcel that's not part of the same property as Price Creek, drill a new well and supply a different end user, say just an industrial park, then I do believe the city would be able to obtain a new and separate water use permit for a separate use with a separate source of water.
I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that information. That is enlightening for me anyway. Mr. Mayor, did you have any questions while Ms. Bell was here? Mr. Sampson? Mr. Kraus, I see. You're more than welcome.
Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, here's something else for you to consider. The offset. The closer the offset is to the river, the greater the impact is. So if you were to do an offset of, say, 100,000 gallons on US 90, its impact on flows is going to be much less than if you were to do an offset close to the river. So the closer to the river your offsets are, the greater the impact you have on your ability to draw water.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we had finished up with we kind of got sidetracked a little bit, but we finished up with our emergency response plan. And I think the next item on the agenda is the water main extension to North Florida Mega Industrial Park, Mr. Helfenberger.
Sure. Tonight I'm asking for reconsideration of supporting the water route study proposed by Jones Edmonds for a variety of reasons. We have existing water capacity problems supplying potable water to the prison. When we flush hydrants at the airport, the pressure drops at the prison. Also, the potable water is needed regardless of any industrial development. There's a residential component to the development of the North Florida Mega Industrial Park. It's planned to take place soon, and it will need potable water. Development would be just on the west side of the west end of the North Florida Mega Industrial Park, very close to our city water plant. The range of housing projected, and I believe it started out originally as about 300 residences, but there's been discussion of going up to possibly 700 residences. If you looked at also the possibility of annexing that area into the city, if you take a look at the average residential home value in Columbia County, it's about $173,000. Well, that translates into a range between almost 52 million to about 121 million of increased property tax base just for that one development. The other thing is, if we're going to do a master plan, which I think we're headed in the direction of, we need to do this part of the study anyway. I believe the cost is roughly going to be about the same. It's about $38,900, and there is money in the professional services budget under water administration, and I double checked with Mike on that, to be able to cover that plus all our existing commitments. So we would have the funds to do that study. And by doing that study, you're also going to it puts us in a better situation for applying for grants and other funding sources for the project. It helps with the timing of it as far as the design and construction, and coordinate the payment of it too. there's been talk of raw water. I don't know if, it was suggested to me by several people that maybe we consider a raw water line through there too. The raw water could be, part of a study. I don't know whether it would be exactly that study or not, but, I think the study would greatly help with our addressing immediate needs for potable water.
Thank you, Mr. Heltenberger. Mr. Sampson, you have any questions?
Yeah, as far as the study goes, I know Jamie's here. Could we run the raw water lines if we decide to do it at Price Creek in the same run that we're doing the potable water? And could this study cover both?
Mr. Chair, Jamie Bell again. Yes, the goal of this study is to determine the demand amounts for water, so how much flow is needed to size the pipe to appropriately carry that water and protect the quality of the water, and then to determine a recommended route to send that water to the end user. And so if the committee and the council wanted us to look at both potable and raw water it would have to be two separate pipes, but they could be co-located along the same route. Yes, we could certainly look at that. And I would have to check on how it works with your DEP permit for the water side. But in theory, you could pull the water from the Price Creek wells and just not treat it, and it would be a separate line. I would have to confirm that. But yes, we can look at both potable and raw water in this routing study.
As part of that, would that cover the use needed for that area as well, when you're talking about the amount, just like the potable?
Yes, it would look at where is this water going and what is the demand? How much water is expected to be needed through this supply line? And that would include, in this case, we're looking at the industrial part, but it's also, as Mr. Heltenberger said, relates to water quality and water pressures at the prison and the proposed residential development. And so we could look at all of these potential end users and project how much demand we need over the planning horizon. And then I could just size the pipes appropriately to carry that flow and maintain its quality.
One more question. So when I was looking through the plan for the project, the phases would take 90 days from beginning to end to complete?
Yes, sir. This is a relatively quick project.
Okay, I don't have any more questions.
And then we need to study before we can do anything out that way.
Yes, sir. And doing this study first will allow the design, permitting, and construction process to go faster because we know exactly what obstacles we may come across, and it's effectively developing a conceptual design of a project. And as Mr. Helfenberger said, that can be used to apply for grant funding and make you more competitive because you already have an idea of where you're going and what you're doing. You just need to finalize the design effectively.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any of the other committee members have questions while Ms. Bell is at the podium? Ms. Bell, for me, I don't think I have any questions. It's just an observation, notwithstanding Mr. Ford's presentation tonight, which I do appreciate. I was disappointed in what the county didn't elect to work with us, and they didn't see value. I understand the challenge is now a little bit better that the county sees with that. But I think when it comes to the city and it comes to potentially 300 to 700 homes, I think the city needs to move forward with utilities, and prepare for growth. And so I would be supportive of this particular item and recommending it to the council.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Ms. Bell, you're welcome to have a seat. You don't have to stand for the vote. Sorry. Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Mr. Brown? Yes. Mr. Helfenberger?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Mr. Sweat?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Witt?
Yes.
Chairman Green?
Yes. All right. That is all of the formal business that we have on the agenda, I believe. I would like to give Mr. Sampson and Mayor Witt an opportunity to speak if they would like to speak before we move to topics for the next meeting. I think Mr. Sampson wanted to speak. So Mr.
Okay. I don't know, Rocky was reading my mind there a little bit, but I have a statement. It's obvious the last couple of years that the city and the county have been at loggerheads for providing utilities in and around Lake City and Columbia County. Now, the main areas of focus and concern have been the Bell Road corridor, the North Florida Mega Industrial Park, and the various choke points in the city wastewater utility. There's also been issues regarding providing potable water at some sites that we've been discussing. For years, Columbia County said they don't want to be in the utility business. Recently, though, they're saying that they want to be in the utility business, and I think they mean business. Listening to the county, it's difficult not to believe that the city has been instrumental in this change of the county's direction. I don't want to say we forced them that way, but I think we've been instrumental in this change. Dueling utilities does not benefit the city or the county. As this is a recent phenomenon, I think we need to nip this in the bud. We are all in this room, as far as I know, on this council, we're Columbia County residents. We pay county taxes, just like the other county residents, and it benefits us to work together to reach a common purpose. Efficient government involves working together for the best interests of the citizens. Tonight, I'm going to recommend to the Utility Advisory Committee that the city commits itself to being the utility for all of Columbia County and that the committee be restructured. I'd like to make 3 motions, if I may. The first motion stating that the Utility Committee recommends to the City Council that the city is dedicated to providing utilities for Lake City and all of Columbia County. The second, that the Utility Committee be reconstituted with the following as voting members. And you're reading my mind. I'd see 2 city councilmen, 2 county commissioners, the city manager, the county manager, the city utility director, and the county economic development director. And the third motion states that the city and county would work together to develop a 5-year strategic plan for the countywide utilities. And that's the statement I'd have at this time.
Mr. Sampson, forgive me for not being able to write as quick as you were speaking. So let's take your first motion first. Would you restate your first motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the Utility Committee recommends to the City Council that the city is dedicated to providing utilities for Lake City and all of Columbia County.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. Anyone online wishing to speak as well?
No hands raised.
Just want to make sure. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffenberger?
Yes.
Mr. Henry? Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Pridgen?
Yes.
Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Mr. Sweat?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Witt?
Yes.
Chairman Green?
Yes. All right, Mr. Sampson, you have a second motion?
Yes, the second motion is that the Utility Committee be reconstituted with the following as the voting members. 2 city councilmen, 2 county commissioners, the city manager, the county manager, the city utility director, and the county economic development director.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion amongst the committee members? All right, anybody online?
No.
Mr. Loper, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a good idea. It's going to be a bit by surprise. Regarding what Commissioner Ford said, that he wants engineers, it's pretty clear, as you see, that Ms. Bell is here tonight. Without a crying baby, it seems like it's different. And obviously, staff members would be engineers, and the engineers don't have to be on the committee as long as they show up, whoever engineer it is. I just wanted to point that out. Should anybody have a problem with that? Thank you. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sampson, I have a question or comment about it. I'm concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse with this motion right at this point in time. My my understanding, right now is that when the county met, they did not have any intention of working with the city on a joint committee. And so I think when we have those members on a city committee at this point, I think it's too early. I think we need to authorize the city manager to reach out to the county manager and try to put it together. I think it would be more timely to do that and make sure that the county wants to be involved before we assign them to be on a city committee.
I think that's part of it. I think the big part though is it's the dual committee system. I think from talking to counterparts in the county, I think they're gonna have a lot of interest in a committee such as that. I don't know. It would definitely have to go to their board. I mean, they would have to approve being involved for sure.
And I would also, for me, I would also like for our entire city council to have an opportunity to review the makeup of the committee. I'm not necessarily opposed, but I do want to make sure that what we're doing is, number one, welcomed by the county, and they would agree to the invitation, right? And I want to make sure that Mr. Helkenberg has the time to work with Mr. Kraus to make sure that the respective staffs are on board with that.
We definitely want to make sure we have consensus with the county for
I
sure.
mean, the purpose of this committee is to make a recommendation to the city council.
Yes.
Which is why it's a little funky that there's three of you up here. But that's the only purpose. You know, whatever Mr. Helkenberger and Mr. Kraus and whoever else wants to do in the meantime, this is just a recommendation. This is the motion that Mr. Sampson is making based on the rules of this committee, is to move this recommendation to the whole city council. That's all you're doing tonight.
I'm aware of
That
that.
wasn't clear.
Yeah, I'm aware. Thank you.
But yeah, so part of it is, I mean, they would have to have approval by their board before they would come aside. I think one of the important things is, I structured it the way I did, particularly because we want to be careful about saying one side is dragging the other side along. We need to work together as a team. And I think if you have co-equal representation, it makes it that I think we're going to get a lot more buy-in if they're willing to come aboard. Yes, for sure.
Mr. Ford.
I like that also. One of the problems we had with the way the makeup of the board was before, well, two problems we had. One problem was two boards, two committees. The other was three commissioners on the board. The three commissioners make a quorum. We felt like that probably wasn't viable to do that, leaving two commissioners out of the county commission meeting. That's one of the reasons I wanted to discuss this with this committee, tonight. But I do plan to bring this before my board Thursday night, next Thursday night.
Yes, sir. And so I'm sympathetic to the forum issue that you raised as well. I think that that's important for the purposes of what we're doing tonight. For us, the mayor's ex officio for us on this particular committee. And so obviously open to those suggestions that you had already made. So again, not opposed. That is a practical concern that needs to be addressed, I think. So just having the discussion tonight of Mr. Sampson's second motion. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? All right, Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
I do want to clarify.
Yes, ma'am.
So when he says he wants to restructure the committee, let's just be absolutely clear. It's not this committee. You're talking about the proposed joint city.
No, it would be this committee.
This committee.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
It would be a single utility for the single utility committee.
Okay.
Mr. Sampson, same thing, I want just before she calls the roll. It is to make a recommendation to the city council.
That's correct.
Structure.
That's correct.
Because that would definitely be an ordinance change. That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
No.
Mr. Hickenberger?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
No.
Mr. Osborne?
No.
Mr. Pridgen?
No.
Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Mr. Sweat?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Witt?
Yes.
Chairman Green?
Yes. Mr. Sampson, I believe you have a third motion.
The third motion is state that if the county comes aboard, we would like to work together to develop a 5-year strategic plan. I think it makes sense that going forward, we need to be a little bit more in the planning. I know that Joe's brought forward before a plan, like a master plan, so it'd be similar to that, but it would encompass the entire county. So we'd have an idea of where the resources best need to be spent.
All right. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'm not sure what the motion is.
The motion is that the city and the county would work together to develop a 5-year strategic plan for the countywide utilities.
Or countywide, but not necessarily the regional without.
No, that's the strategic plan for countywide utilities.
I got it.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
So a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is just for the 5-year plan, though, correct?
Right. Just to do a 5-year plan, is what my understanding is.
That's the way I understand it as well.
And I
That's
think-
correct.
So
We should have had a plan 5 years ago.
absolutely. So once again, Mr. Sampson, I would have a concern that we are putting the cart before the horse in inviting, once again, the county to join the city on this 5-year plan when we don't know that the county is interested in joining the city utility. They've said in their meeting that they weren't when we approached them. They said that they weren't. Mr. Ford tonight has said that he's in favor of developing a regional utility. And so what I'm concerned about is that we're going to include the county potentially on a plan that they may have no interest in.
I think that's an important observation. It could be they're not interested, and in which case, when it comes before the city council, if we pass the motion and we pass it, they still have to pass it on their side. So if they're not interested, I don't think they would move forward with it.
My position, we do one together, if they aren't interested, then we do one ourselves, so we do need 5 years.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is, and I don't know, I spoke to Mr. Traubenberg about the possibly engaging the county anyways to see if what we can do to go down to Ellisville and swing through Fort White and loop back. And have you engaged in any discussion on that yet?
No, I have not, other than I talked a little bit to Dale Williams on it. He's an advisor for Fort White, and he's interested in having a meeting on it.
I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'm not sure, the county may not be interested. This is just us moving forward on our side. It's up to them if they're going to reach out. It's an olive branch. But then if they do reach out, then we can work together. If they don't, then we know where we're at and what we need to focus on.
All right. And that's a recommendation for the city council.
That's
yes?
correct.
All right. Ms. Sykes, are you clear on the motion?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
I'll get his notes after the meeting as well.
I got something for you.
So real quick, before we have Ms. Sykes call the roll, I just want to make sure, anybody else, in person want to talk on this topic? And then, Ms. Mandy, anybody online?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Sykes, would you call the roll?
Mr. Brown? Mr. Knoppenberger?
Yes,
Mr. Henry? Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Pridgen? Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Mr. Sweat?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mayor Witt?
Yes,
Chairman Green?
Yes. Mr. Sampson, you still have the floor.
I think that's everything I have right now.
That was a lot.
I have some other stuff. We'll save it. We'll need something for the meeting next time.
Mayor Witt?
I think we made a lot of progress tonight. I think, we're gonna work it out with the county and, it's gonna take about a it's working and there's gonna be some rough times of it, but I think we just gotta keep working to work what's best for the community. As we talked about at the last meeting, utilities are not cheap. Don't just jump out there and make mistakes, and that's one reason we're doing all these studies and we have these experts doing it. And that's why we need a plan. And do this. I think we need to take it a step at a time, do it right, and do it the best for the community, because if you make mistakes, you're costing the users, and we can't do that.
let's see, topics for the next meeting. Mr. Helpenberger, I think that there may be an invitation.
I'd like to invite Fred Handy to come out here and talk a little bit about the issues relating to increasing the city's consumptive use permit allocation.
Who is that?
He's with the Florida Rural Water Association. He's a water expert. The other thing on these committees is I think I would still require all of the directors and everybody to come to all these meetings because we need their input.
That's great.
We cannot go forward without it.
I concur. Anyone else on the committee have topics now? And it's okay if you don't. You can get your topics to the clerk's office later. But does anybody have anything that they want to bring up while we're all together? Yes, sir.
Ordinance 2174 came before you at your last committee meeting. That ordinance relates to the impact fee waivers for affordable housing. If you want to see any specific revisions, please get with me or Mr. Dave Young. We have revised it to include a 10-year encumbrance as well as allow for flexibility on multifamily developments as well as other mixed-use developments with 30% or more dwellings appropriated to affordable housing. So if you want to see more specifics or changes to those, please get with us as soon as possible so that the document can be ready in time for agenda discussion.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Ms. Sykes, if you would add that topic for the next meeting as well.
I'll add it, yes, thank you.
Anybody else have a topic that they want to add? Next meeting date would be the next item that we'll discuss. I know I'm available on February 11th and 19th, preferably February 11th if everybody's amenable to that date. If not, the 19th would be an alternate date. Is there a motion to have the next meeting on one of those dates?
I make the motion to have the meeting on the 11th.
Motion. Second, by voice vote, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so the next utility advisory committee meeting is going to be February the 11th. For the clerk's office, Ms. Sykes, does that give you the required timelines to be able to?
I can send it out to everyone. I'm not. Yeah, I can send it out.
So I'm sure that we're all aware by now. Again, if you have something you want to add to the agenda, make sure you have it to the clerk's office in a timely manner so that she can make public notice. Last chance, Mr. Ford.
I just want to ask, clarify, if I understand what happened here, y'all are not willing to bring it before the council for a regional utility, is that what I'm?
My opinion is we'll discuss it, we're just way too early to even be, we need to, just like I mentioned earlier, we need to get somebody to form and that type of thing.
We're gonna work on readjusting this committee and then a strategic plan getting together if you guys are willing to do it, if our board approves it. But now we can come together and do a unified strategic plan for the county.
Okay.
Mr. Ford, I think one of the things to address your concern is I think it's cleaner if the city manager and the county manager work through the details and we can go through them to make sure that we're moving down the same
Yeah, I
path.
just want to make sure what I represent my board is what actually.
Yes, sir. Mr. Osborne.
If I can get some clarification on some things. If the county's not interested, is the board gonna stay privy to what it is now, or is the county still gonna be included?
I think the changes are contingent on them wanting to send somebody. I mean, if they don't want to do it, then there's no need to change. I think it's kind of an unwieldy board to begin with. There seems to be a lot of members on it. I think the input we need is good, But I think, like I recommended at the city council meeting when they designated this board, I think it needs to be a smaller number, for sure. But definitely, if they don't want to come aboard, we're not gonna appoint them if they don't want to do it.
I just didn't know if we took this to the city council and they approved it, and then the county said no, where that would leave the board and who would be in the.
No, they have to vote to approve
This
this.
finally started meeting again. I
Right.
hate to see-
Yeah, no.
I would say, Mr. Osborne, that there is not a change to the Utility Advisory Committee until there is a change to the Aggie Advisory Committee. So it is currently made up of its members until it is no longer made up.
I just got one final thing. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Green, for the way you run the meeting, allowing public comment. Some of you may not remember, I go to WIC committee meetings. Years ago, Swain Legal Services came and looked at the mayor and said, I like what I see here. And I like what I see here. And there was a problem with the microphones. Lake City stepped up and has been working hard to fix the microphones, and as everybody can see, everybody can hear. When there was a problem with capacity, the city worked on that. So it seems that everything that the public brings up, the city actually does something. Sometimes the county's a little slow. The public still can't participate online at county meetings, Commissioner Ford, and you want to work on that. But you do answer questions. I just came from a college meeting. They got a clock there, and I think they have somebody with a crossbow that stands behind the clock. So if you go over 1 second, they just shoot the arrow. I just missed it this evening, and they refused to answer any questions. So again, I'd like to thank the city for doing this since 2006 in this area, and the city has always been the bar that other people are measured to, and I thank you, Mr. Green, for carrying that on.
Noted. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I get to vote on it?